Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr. Tom Osborne.
Pleasure to be here. I appreciate Mr. Miller adjusting the schedule. He called me yesterday and said, "Where are you?" I said, "I just passed over Loudon." He said, "Well, we're thinking about maybe canceling the event." And I said, "Well, okay." But it worked out where I could come back today. And I understand some of you folks have been sitting here a while, so I apologize for that. But anyway, just a quick word about teammates. I understand that teammates is doing well here in the community, and I really want to thank Pete Lapisotis, who's been very helpful. I think Cassie also has been very helpful, and teammates, and then so many of you, maybe some of you are mentors, and some of you are in the program, and we appreciate that. I believe that Lisa is running the program here now. She was Rebel and maybe got married, and people confused me by changing their names when they get married. And so I want to thank her as well. But I'm not here necessarily to talk about teammates, and here to congratulate you on achievement. It's my understanding that a great many of you have exceeded the state standard, and so we appreciate that very much. And so I'm going to talk to you this morning about really three things. One is going to be about education, second about character, and then thirdly about balance. And it won't be overly long, so don't worry about it. First of all, in regard to the education part of it, those of you who have achieved well, and certainly deserve congratulations. And once in a while, I would deal with a football player who had not achieved as well as you have. I remember this one guy that came in and we recruited him, and he was a very good player, but his transcript was not very impressive. And so we were worried about getting him admitted to the University of Nebraska. So I took him over to the registrar's office and I said, "Now, this gentleman here maybe needs the short form of the entrance exam." And he said, "Okay." He said, "What does he want to study?" I said, "Well, he's interested in agriculture." And he said, "Okay, I'll give him a two-part question. He can just answer the two parts that he's in." So he said, "Okay, you're interested in agriculture?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, well, here's the first part of the question." He said, "What's a place where you raise hogs and have cows and grow corn and soybeans and milo? What's that called?" Well, the guy drew a blank. And he just tightened up and began to perspire and began to see that this thing may not work out very good. So he said, "Okay," he said, "I'll give you a hint." He said, "Old MacDonald had a," and the guy said, "farm." And so I kind of relaxed. And he said, "Okay, here's the second part of the question." He said, now how do you spell farm?" And the guy just lit up. He said, "Oh, that's easy." He said, E-I-E-I-O. So all of you guys could have gotten that right. Well, anyway, as far as the education part of it goes, one thing that Warren Buffett said, I don't know if you know who Warren Buffett is. He's a guy in Omaha that has a lot of money, about $45 billion, I guess. But one thing that he advises young people to do is to invest in yourself. And think about that, think about investing in farmland or investing in the stock market or investing. He said you ought to invest in yourself. Make yourself as valuable as you possibly can. And the thing that will make you more valuable than anything else is an education. Because when people look at your resume, when they look at whether they want to hire you, whether they want to do business with you, certainly education is at the top of the list. So I hope that you will do that. I hope that you will consider that. There are a few figures that might be interesting to you. The average high school dropout, you get to be 16, you decide you're not going to continue with school, probably is limited to pretty much minimum wage. And we all know some people who dropped out of high school who do really well, make a lot of money, but the odds are stacked against you. And so, on average, you're probably looking at a lifetime income of a total of maybe $800,000. If you have a high school diploma, you're looking at about $1.3 million. That's an additional $500,000 of earning capacity if you just stay in school for those 2 extra years after you're 16. If you go on to college, things begin to change rather dramatically. The average high school graduate, well, college graduate will probably earn about $2.5 million during their lifetime, and that's an average. Some will do more, some will do less. And then if they go beyond that, earn a PhD or some kind of professional degree, it gets up around $4 million. So the more education you have, the more earning power you have, and the more doors are open. There's so many jobs around the country that the minimum rung, the bottom rung, the minimum requirement is at least so much education. So the more you have, the more doors are open to you. And so I would second what Warren Buffett advises, and that is to invest in yourself. Make sure that you've gone as far as you can go. And sometimes people say, well, there's expense, and I don't know if I want to take out a student loan and so on. But I would say in 99% of the cases, people will find that whatever they have to do to invest more of themselves will be very, very much worth it. The other thing is to take a long view. Sometimes it's easy to take shortcuts and to say, well, I'm going to get out of school at 16 or finish high school and that's it. But the ability to postpone what may seem quick and easy and take the narrower path, which is a little bit longer, a little bit harder, will eventually pay off for you. And I've seen that over and over again. It's important that each one of you have some kind of a post-secondary skill. So we tell all the kids that are teammates, we say, yeah, graduate from high school, but be sure that you go on and you get some kind of skill. So it may be community college, it may be a trade school, whatever it may be, but you need a marketable skill. That's going to be important. I don't know if any of you have heard of a guy named Ben Carson. Ben Carson was a young African-American man who grew up in Detroit. And Ben was a guy who was not doing well in school. And the kids in his class called him Dummy because he always had the lowest test score. He was a guy that could not answer questions from the teacher. And so they gave him that name of Dummy. And his mother, he had no father. His mother worked 3 jobs. And so sometimes he didn't see his mother for several days at a time because she would leave in the morning about 7 o'clock, about the time he was getting up. And she'd come home at midnight after working 3 jobs. And so she saw his grade, she became alarmed, and she said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I want you to check out 2 books from the library and read those books every week and write a book report for me and no television. And at first he hated it, and he thought it was terrible. But over time, 2 books a week, book report, he read widely as his horizons began to expand, and pretty soon he was no longer a dummy. He was a guy, in about 3 years, that the kids were coming to asking for help with their schoolwork. And the guy went on to become a neurosurgeon and is one of the most prominent doctors in the country today. And so that kind of discipline is certainly what pays off. So anyway, I think it's important that you get as much education as you can. Secondly, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about character. And I think it's important to think about this. People often say that in hiring people, They look for three things. They look for intelligence, they look for energy, and they look for character. And I would agree with that. And if I were to hire somebody and they had intelligence and they had energy, but they didn't have character, I would be very concerned. Because somebody who does not have character can get you in all kinds of trouble. So we hear a lot of talk about character, but what is it? What does it mean? And so a guy named Horace Greeley, who was a rather famous newspaper man many years ago, said this. He said, "Fame is vapor, popularity is an accident, money takes wings. Those who cheer you today will curse you tomorrow." I know a little bit about that. He said the only thing that endures is character. And so what he was saying is a lot of the things that we chase after, like popularity, comes and it goes. I remember when I was in the 3rd grade, I moved to Hastings, Nebraska, and the most popular kid was a kid named David. And everybody thought David was really a neat guy. And by the time we were junior high school, David wasn't so popular, or high school. And so fame and popularity kind of comes and it goes. Sometimes money comes and it goes. A lot of things we chase after are impermanent. But the one thing about you, that's the most important thing about you today, will be the most important thing on the day that you die, is your character. That's something nobody can take away from you. So, what is character? Aristotle said this: character is that which reveals moral purpose. And it's indicated by the class of things a person chooses or avoids. So if we know what you do on the internet, if we know what kind of books you read, what kind of magazines you read, what kind of things you stay away from, what friends you're attracted to, what friends you stay away from, you can have an idea of your character. And then probably the big one, the best definition, I think, of character that I've found, is one by Thomas Macaulay. When Macaulay said this, he said, "Character has to do with what you would do if you knew you would not be found out." So let's say tonight you're walking down the street, and it's kind of dark out. You see a billfold laying on the sidewalk. And you pick it up, there's a $100 bill in the billfold, but there's also a driver's license in the billfold. So you can make a choice to look around. There's nobody in sight. Nobody knows that you have the billfold. So you can put the $100 in your pocket, and you can throw the billfold in the bushes, or you can get the $100 and the billfold back to the person it belongs to because you got the driver's license. And so what you would do at that point, where you felt nobody was going to know, where nobody could have any sanctions, that is indicative of your character. Or let's say that tomorrow you've got a term paper due, and you haven't done your homework, and you're way behind. You can stay up all night and hammer something out that probably will at best get you a C or a D because you're really in a rush. Or if you absolutely knew that your teacher was computer illiterate, there aren't many teachers like that anymore, and you knew you could punch a few keys on your computer to get a paper that was really well written, and you could turn it in, and nobody would know that you had plagiarized that. What would you do at that point? That would have to do with your character. So anyway, I think character is a very important thing. And I'll just talk to you a little bit about what we look for. When we went out to recruit an athlete, we certainly looked at height, weight, speed. The first thing we looked at was grades. And so often, we find somebody with excellent athletic ability and talent, but we couldn't recruit them, we couldn't offer them a scholarship because they didn't have a 2.5 grade point average in all 4 subjects. They didn't have an ACT or an SAT score of a certain level. And in that case, we couldn't go any further. But if they had the grades and they had the athletic ability, then the next thing that we wanted to know about was character. And probably 2 or 3 things that would be important. Number 1, integrity. Will they tell you the truth? And will they keep promises? That's what integrity is. Telling the truth and keeping promises. And so what I wanted was a player who would always tell me the truth, even if the truth didn't make him look good, even if he made a mistake. If he would level with me, I could work with him. But on the other hand, he looked me right in the eye and he'd tell me something wasn't true. And I couldn't trust him. And if you can't trust somebody, then your team is weakened, your family is weakened, your organization, your school. And so great organizations are built on trust, and integrity is part of trust. So that was important. Secondly, I think something has to do with character and work ethic. You know, the person will go the extra mile, make sure their homework's done before they do anything. Will they go the extra mile in the weight room, working out? That's important. And then lastly, contribution. And they're willing to contribute to other people. I'll tell you a quick story about a guy that I think pretty well exemplifies this. 1994, we had a good football team. We had a great quarterback, a guy named Tommy Frazier. And about the third game of the season, Tommy Frazier had a lot of pain in the back of his leg. Nobody knew what was wrong. Took him to the doctor, and they diagnosed him. They said, well, he has a blood clot that went the full length of his leg. They said he won't play anymore this year. He may never play anymore again. So we had a young guy named Brooke Beringer, who was a second-team quarterback, and we didn't know what to expect. Brooke was from a small town, about like Bridgeport in western Kansas. And Tommy had been a starter for us. He'd been played in the state championship down in Florida in front of 60,000 people. And Brooke had probably never played in front of anybody in a crowd of more than 300 people. But he went out there and he played well. Got hit. He had a collapsed lung. They put a needle in it like a basketball. He inflated it. And he played the next week and got hit again. The lung collapsed again. Inflated it again. He said, no, if this happens again, he's done for the year. Unfortunately, he held up, and he took us through 9 straight wins. And we beat Miami down in the Orange Bowl, won the national championship, had an undefeated season. But this is where the part comes in that got interesting. The next year, Frazier had recovered. Tommy was back, and Brooke was back, and it wasn't Tommy's fault that he got hurt, and he had been the starting quarterback. And Brooke had taken us to a national championship. So the question is, who's going to play quarterback? So we graded everything they did throughout fall camp, and we finally found out that there was just one play that made a difference. Brooke had thrown an interception. Tommy had thrown any turnovers in fall camp, so we gave the ball to Tommy Frazier. And Frazier was the quarterback for the rest of the year. We had great players that year. It wouldn't have made any difference who was the quarterback. We would have won them all. Nobody came close to us that year. And so Brooke could have led it with goals. Players would have followed him. A lot of players would have been back to him, so would have Tommy, and we could have had the whole thing fall apart. But what Brooke Beringer did, I think, illustrated the highest form of character. He said what needed to be said. He backed Frazier. He supported Frazier. He stood on the sideline, bit his lip, and did what he had to do and held that team together. And so character is about contributing to other people, even when sometimes it's painful as far as your own self is concerned. The last thing I'll mention to you is the issue of balance. I think that's important as well. Education is important. Certainly character is important. Lastly, having a sense of balance in your life. You know, about 4,000 years ago, the Greeks said this. They said that an educated person is one who has balance in his or her life. They said there are really 3 dimensions of human experience. They said there's, first of all, there's the physical dimension. Remember, the Greeks had the Greek games and they had athletics, and they emphasized that in their education. Secondly, they said there's the intellectual dimension, the mental. They had mathematicians and scholars and philosophers, very intellectual people. And then thirdly, they said there's the spiritual dimension. They said almost all of human behavior can fall under one of those 3 categories, the physical, the intellectual, and the spiritual. And I thought about that because every year we had quite a few players drafted in the NFL draft. The next weekend is the NFL draft, and there'll be 3 or 4 players chosen from Nebraska's team. And at that time we had maybe 6 or 7 or 8 players drafted. And so these guys had the American dream. If you watch television, it's advertising, the American dream is this: it's to have money. And these guys at age 22 had money. Number one pick with $10 million, or even if you're a 7th round pick, $400,000, they had money. Secondly, the American dream is to have talent. They're probably never 1/10 or 1% athletically. They had an athletic talent. Thirdly is to have celebrity. People want your autograph, want to hang around, say they met you or whatever. They have that celebrity. Then fourthly, what a lot of you guys here have, and I don't have anymore, and that's youth. And so these guys at age 22, 23 had the whole package. And you would think that they would be set for the rest of their life, right? Because they had it all. Then I was seeing them come back out of the National Football League, maybe 3 years or 5 years, or maybe 10 years later. And I was kind of surprised because on occasion I was seeing some broken people. I was seeing some people who really weren't doing very well with their lives, and I began to puzzle about it. I realized that some of them were one-dimensional. They knew how to block, they knew how to tackle, they knew where the weight room was, and they'd taken their physical ability to the highest possible level. And when the blocking and the tackling was over, there was nothing else in their life that gave them any purpose. And they would really begin to drift pretty badly. But then you'd say, well, most of your guys had degrees, they had a college education, they had the intellectual part, so they would do well. They had that second dimension. But you know, if your whole identity, from maybe the time you were 10 or 11 years old, was being a great athlete, that's who you were known for, and then all of a sudden, the knee injury hits, somebody cuts you from the team, that goes away as well. And so I began to realize that maybe that third dimension was important. It seemed like those guys who had a strong spiritual dimension said, well, whatever ability I have, athletically or whatever talent, whatever time, I'm going to honor God for what I've been given. Somehow those guys would weave their way through it because their life still had purpose and meaning. So we felt that was very important. So I guess what I would suggest to you today is to examine all 3 levels of the human experience. Certainly take care of your body, make sure that you stay in reasonably good condition, stay active. Certainly you want to develop your mind. We talked about education, how important it is. But thirdly, I would recommend to you that you think about the spiritual dimension. And normally that's affiliated with religion, religious expression, honoring God in some way. There may be some of you here who for some reason don't believe in God. But also spirituality is giving yourself to a cause that's more important than yourself. So if you can find something in your life that's more important than you are, that also is something that develops that spiritual dimension. So those are some things that I would recommend to you. Lastly, let me just say this. There was somebody did a study and survey of some people who were old, about like me, and they said, looking back at your life, what regrets do you have? And they said 2 things. Number one, I wish that I had taken more risks. You know, sometimes we tend to get in a rut and say, well, I maybe wanted to do this occupation, make this trip, take a foreign language, whatever it may be. That's kind of hard. And so they settle back into the rut. And so at the end of their life, they said, you know, I wish I'd explored my dreams a little bit more, and willing to step out and take some chances. And then secondly, they said, I wish I had done more for other people. Those are the 2 things that people in my age, looking back on their lives, often said. And so you guys, in a position where you don't have to do that, you've got time, you've got a chance. I can't go back and relive my life. I can't go back and redo things. And so don't be afraid to aim high. Don't be afraid to reach out and take some chances. And then above all, don't be afraid to invest in other people and make their lives better. So these are some of my thoughts, and I want to thank you for your kind attention today. We sat on those hard benches, relatively still, not completely, but relatively. And that's a high achievement. I also want to thank you for the achievement that so many of you have accomplished as far as the state standards. I want to thank those of you in the community, families, parents, grandparents for being here today. I've always liked Western Nebraska, and I appreciate the support so many of you have given to the teammate program as well. So thank you for having me here. It's been a pleasure. And once again, congratulations.